Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly live streams, the Wednesday live streams, the first of 2021. And I'm super excited to kickstart this for this year. So, the first one for this year, I was thinking we can go over the journey of Hasura and GraphQL in the last year in 2020, how the product evolved on the open source community and also on the cloud front, right? Before we begin, a pretty happy new year for everybody. I hope everyone enjoyed the weekend and yeah, back to work with full energy, right? So, so this is going to be more of a walkthrough over what we did over the last 1 year and how the product has evolved, right? And and start off with beginning of early last year, January, we begin with the stable version of Hasura, which is the V 1.0, and it was all pretty incremental change for that one, but the whole prior to the stable version, we had a huge uh, backlog of updates that had to be done, and 1.0 was just like a version change for us, and it happened in December of 2019. We entered 2020 with the stable version with all the workings ready, and going into February, we had Graphical Asia, which was a physical event, and was the last physical event that I was part of. And we also had our Series A funding announcement, so that came in at the right time, and that really helped us expand the team and the product to move forward. And GraphQL Asia was a pretty a successful event, and it happened in Bangalore, and there was an awesome speaker lineup. We had like around 43 speakers uh, covering wide range of topics and from different companies, enterprises. So it was a pretty crazy event uh, because it was right around the time of when the coronavirus started to actually hit people to get locked down all over the world. So we were actually kind of lucky to have gone through that phase without any hiccups. So that was crazy. And in March, we had an update on the OSS code base where we actually finally switched to TypeScript for our console. And this was a decision which was being explored for a few months. There were other alternatives like ReasonML and Elm and so on, but we stick to TypeScript because of the ease of transition and the ID support and so on. Alexandra from our team wrote a blog post as well, citing the reasons for why we chose TypeScript. So do check that out. That was a good starting point for our console code base to have types. And now I think by end of this year, 2020, we've had like a good code base coverage with TypeScript. And we've had contributions from the external community as well, chipping in with code snippets for types, right? So that was March, the beginning of TypeScript migration. So that was pretty good to start with. And April is when we had the big release. We had the version 1.2 release, which had a couple of major changes. We had Hasura Actions, which was a huge change for the custom business logic story. And we had a new workflow for migrations as well, which included the way how actions is being handled and the whole metadata and migrations being handled separately. So that was a huge change in April. And with actions, we also had the entire month of April with Action Packed April YouTube series, where we had a bunch of videos, tutorials being done for demoing actions. So that went through different use cases for actions. So that was on YouTube. Do check that out. I'll post the link on chat in some time. And schedule triggers in May. So so this was a feature which was there in beta for some time, and this was a pretty good use case driven feature because schedule triggers was long awaited by a lot of users who wanted to extend the current event system that we had with Hasura. The current event system was obviously about Postgres database events. With schedule triggers, you can actually extend that to your own custom HTTP handler for a recurring time interval. So a time-based trigger for your events. That's what schedule triggers were, and that was a good starting point for extending the event system story around Hasura. So that was in May, even though I think schedule triggers was part of the beta release earlier, and I think the stable release was also slightly in probably July. So that was schedule triggers. And June was pretty exciting. There were a lot of updates in June. In fact, the first half of the year was packed with updates, and I think June just took all of it, overshadowed all of it. So we had the user conference, the Hasura Con 2020, the first online user conference. GraphQL Asia was the physical conference we had in Feb, but Hasura Con we're forced to do the online conference, but I think it ended up being a pretty good conference because a lot of people were able to join in from different parts of the world, and different people were able to share their experience around using Hasura. So that was a pretty good online experience for us in both organizing it and as well as participating in conferences and talks online. So that was Hasura Con. That was in June, third to fourth week. That's when I think we also launched Hasura Cloud, the cloud version of our product. That, and I'll come back to the cloud version of in a different slide. Um, July is something when we had the stable version of 1.3, which had a huge update with all of these beta testing done for a pretty long time. We had remote joins, we had schedule triggers, which was in beta, and we had relay. So all of these bundled together in this huge 1.3 release in July. So that was a huge update for us for the open source product. And we have obviously the cloud one also got that version immediately. And August, I've mentioned it as PDB refactor for the server, but this is like an ongoing. This was an ongoing process for the server for a pretty long time. We were refactoring our server code so that we could accommodate multiple data sources pretty easily. The way how queries are being handled. So this is a significant change to the server code base, and this also allows us to move faster with adding updates to the server code. So that's a pretty significant update last year that we did to the server code. And September was another crazy event. We had support for multiple databases with starting with MySQL and SQL Server. MySQL, we in fact released a public beta. where people could try it out with Docker Compose setup. And SQL Server was in a private beta where enterprises could get in touch with us, and people can try it out. So so that's when Hasura opened up as the data access layer for your application, with with not just being Postgres anymore. Now it's mostly about bringing your own data source, and the database can be anything. And the Series B funding also came in at that time. We had the announcement in September, and it was all focused towards adding more support for databases, multiple databases, and improving the community and investing in the community, the open source community as well. So that was a pretty good progress in terms of the server, and the PDV refactor also played a huge role in facilitating that update. And coming back to October, again we had another conference. This was focused towards enterprise, and this is the Enterprise GraphQL Conf in October. And we had like a few enterprises coming in and sharing their stories around how they used Hasura in architecting their application, and it validated the way Hasura is being used in large scale applications. So that was a pretty interesting conference that we had in October. And as every year we do, we've also like been part of Hacktoberfest this year. The number of PRs which have been contributed by the community, and we've merged them on different repos. So that's been a pretty good update for October as well. And for November, we have streamlined the office hours and webinars and the live streams that we've started to do on a regular schedule. So we've been having monthly webinars and weekly live streams and office hours. So that's going on pretty nicely. And so that was an update on November. And to end the year, for December, I think the cloud product had added support for multiple regions. It had, I think, 5 regions before, and we've added support for more regions across the globe. So that was for cloud. And we also got certified for HIPAA and SOC 2 Type 1. Just making sure the security aspect and the certification is in place for enterprises to start adopting Hasura in large scale. So that's the rough timeline of events that we had last year. Now we'll go over some of them in the next few slides. So just to step back and thank the community for their involvement in Hasura, and just a few stats to remind you. There were like 413 pull requests that were merged last year, and I'm sure some of them were from external people, the community in general. Part of it was in Hacktoberfest, part of it was for the TypeScript migration, and so on. So props to the community to participating in the entire OSS contributions. And you can see that there are thousand plus issues were created. So that's interesting because you see that the product is being adopted pretty rapidly, and the use cases for different applications keep changing, and there are different constraints and different documentation that needs to be updated, and the issues being created is a reflection of that, and we're trying to rapidly fix all of them. Though we've fixed a few of them, I think we have a vast number of documentation that can be improved, and we're definitely working towards that this year. But on a lighter note, we just shared the Docker pull numbers. We've just reached the milestone of 100 million Docker pulls. So that's really an important milestone to reach. Just validates the usage of Hasura by companies and developers across the world. So that's amazing. And the Discord community, which has been super active, and the membership is just growing. We now have 8,000 plus members on Discord, and like around 500 plus being online at any point of time for you to check out with and like talk to people, get your queries answered, and we have a good community championship program. So we have a set of community champions who volunteer to help out users and who just love the product and advocate for that, right? So that's the community stats. To end it up, we are also closing down on 20,000 GitHub stars. So that's another interesting metric to note down, and we hope to reach that pretty soon. We I think probably 100 away from that milestone, and if you've not starred, please do star on GitHub and spread the word. All right, so product update. Start off with Actions, which got released in April with 1.2. We've had a story around custom business logic, which had a few workarounds to be done before Actions were released. You had to use Postgres. You have to leverage database functions and probably create views for data transformations and so on. So, but for some use cases, obviously, you will not be able to completely leverage what Postgres is about to offer. So, Actions was the answer for writing your own custom business logic as a REST endpoint. So you can write REST APIs with Actions, and the idea behind Actions is that with the remote schemas, you would create your GraphQL server, your custom resolvers. With Actions, you'll write your own HTTP handler, which is just the REST API, and it could be written in any language or framework of choice, right? So that's the whole idea behind Actions, coming from a CQRS pattern, and and this actually opened up the whole custom business logic layer with Hasura, and you can also like use your existing REST APIs by rewriting just small portions of it. So that's going to be that was going to be a good change to handle your custom logic with Hasura. And since it's any language or framework, it's because it's just a HTTP handler that you have to map to your GraphQL types. So the resolver is basically your HTTP endpoint, and you write GraphQL types and map them to the resolver, which is the REST endpoint, right? So the idea behind this is pretty simple. Whenever you have some APIs that you need to customize for some reason, most likely a mutation where you need to do some kind of validation or data transformation and so on. So that's when you will probably be using Actions and doing some custom logic. And maybe if you also want to use schedule triggers by triggering some events, then Actions is the place where you will most likely do that logic of triggering events. So this really opened up the entire use case of writing custom business logic with Hasura. And the next update is the data federation, which has been there for a pretty long time in beta. We've done a few posts on remote joins back in 2019 as well, with integrations with multiple GraphQL servers, public-facing GraphQL servers. For example, We've had integrations with OneGraph, which had like a bunch of services bundled in, uh, exposed as a GraphQL API. We've attempted GraphQL API integrations with CMSs like Graph CMS and Contentful, and so on. So what remote joins did is that uh, you can add obviously GraphQL servers as remote schemas in Hasura. With the remote joins, you can establish relationships between your Postgres tables and your remote schemas. So this means that you can actually add external sources and then also like link it back to the data in Postgres. So you can merge the data query in one place. The client can actually just make one single API call, but fetch data from multiple sources due to the remote join relationship. So we did this whole series of join all the things with integrations with multiple services. We also did one with the Open API to GraphQL from IBM, which meant that you can convert any Open API or REST API to GraphQL using that service, and then add that to Hasura as a remote schema, and then eventually you can obviously establish relationships between them. We also recently attempted adding Gatsby as a remote schema and establishing relationship between a Postgres table and Gatsby's remote schema. This was because Gatsby exposed a graphical API for its own schema in a dev environment, and we can actually add them through the GraphQL endpoint. So a bunch of use cases started to come up, and this was a pretty good exploration, and we became stable with Data Federation mid of 2020. So that's one of the updates in 2020. And the next big thing we had was Hasura Cloud, which which came in June, and we were in preview for the first couple of months, and but the idea behind Cloud was that you have this open source GraphQL engine which you were running previously on your own hosting provider. With Hasura Cloud, we take care of the infrastructure concerns that you previously had with self-hosting it. So some of the concerns like auto scaling and monitoring, tracing, and probably security concerns, all of those were taken care by Hasura Cloud features. So and the other important feature is caching. So there are like caching at two layers. There's query caching and there's data response caching. This is totally possible because of the way GraphQL queries handle at runtime, and and what Hasura does is it basically caches data per user. So it is authorized data. So if you are able to access your own data and you're not able to access somebody else's data due to the permission system, then the caching also works that way. So that's a pretty interesting update, and I think with more regions and more edge caching, cloud should be a great choice for backend developers to start using it and just leverage the features out of the box, because you don't have to write anything extra on the client or on the backend for this. You don't need to customize anything additionally for this. Um, we take care of the infrastructure piece automatically for you, and you also have monitoring and tracing. So if in production, if something goes wrong, Hasura will be able to give you the right data for you to debug, and the request response can be can be traced. So that's the the set of features that Hasura Cloud gives you. So that is an update for cloud. And and the community side, for learn courses, we introduced learn courses in early 2019, and we've had all the frameworks being covered typically, and some of them needed updates with changing clients and changing Hasura version as well. So we introduced new courses as well, which was graphical basics to start off with, for developers who are pretty new to GraphQL and are pretty unfamiliar with GraphQL, right? So GraphQL Basics was a new course that we launched last year. We're going to have an advanced version of this pretty soon, and we had this whole new course around RxDB, the offline first series. So with offline first apps, you want to build an application where data in your database, like Postgres, you should be able to fetch that data and use that locally in offline mode, and be able to sync back once you are online. So this is a pretty complex use case and a pretty genuine use case that users had, and it will open up a lot of applications with front end apps being offline first. So we did a whole app around RxDB offline first. I think we built a Trello clone which had offline first capabilities, and so that was a good experiment with RxDB. We had to make a PR to RxDB for certain changes as well. So the whole offline first series went in pretty nicely, and we plan to keep updating with new content around that this year. So stay tuned for that. And and there was another new learn course, which was Next.js on popular demand. So this was an update which showcased how Jamstack apps can be built. So Next.js has both SSR and client-side rendering. So we wanted to showcase how Hasura GraphQL can be integrated with Auth0 and Next.js capabilities. So we leveraged their API routes, and we also leveraged the server-side rendering aspect of it to just demo how an app with GraphQL can be built. So that's a course that you can check out on Learn. And we obviously updated the courses for React, Angular, and Flutter, mostly all from the community. So props to the community members who contributed to these courses. The React one had a huge update with support for Apollo Client 3, and the Angular as well. The versions keep changing with Angular on every release. So Angular had a huge update as well. I think currently we support Angular 10 and Flutter as well, with the new library, GraphQL Flutter. So updates across the board for maintenance on Learn courses uh, was a was another thing. So just looking at the comments, we have Calamaleon asking, can you do Svelte native with auth? So we did a small blog post on Svelte, but not Svelte native, I guess. I think it was just Svelte 3 with GraphQL queries, mutation subscriptions. But sure, we can take this as a request for Learn course, and obviously Svelte is on the roadmap for a Learn course. So we can take care of uh, this native with auth integration as well. I'm sure the Learn course will come with an auth integration. So hopefully, when that is released, that'll be useful for Swell people. Cool. So the other thing that we did regularly was the Hasura community call. We started this series of community calls on a monthly basis from 2019 November, and last year we featured one community demo every month where a Hasura user from the community would share their application demo on the way how they architected the app and how they've used the GraphQL APIs across their app. So pretty interesting demos across the year on the community calls. So so do check them out if you are interested in fancy applications being built by different people. Cool. So GraphQL Asia, as I mentioned earlier, this was the last physical event that happened in 2020. We had 40 plus speakers, and I think we had an attendance of around 400 people in the conference. And I think the talks ranged from how GraphQL is being adopted in large enterprise scaling, and to to how the new features like deference stream is being adopted, and what the future of GraphQL will look like. 2020 was incidentally like the 5 years of GraphQL from when it was launched. So that was another update where we had people from Lee Biden to different people in the GraphQL community, just sharing the experience of how GraphQL has evolved over the last 5 years. So that was also part of another update. And another event, obviously, HasuraCon, the first online user conference we had in June. We had like a bunch of talks, and and interestingly, the platform that we used for hosting this conference, the Conf platform, it was built on Hasura, and it went out pretty smooth. The whole conference with with the whole platform being built on Hasura with all the subscriptions for chat and the whole streaming experience. So that was interesting from the conference perspective. And there were plenty of talks as well. Even our engineers gave in some workshops, and Shahid from our team also talked about how we used Hasura at Hasura. So that opened up a lot of interesting use cases on how ourselves, Hasura, use the product. So that was an interesting set of talks and workshops for the conference. And yes, third year in a row, we joined Hacktoberfest. This was pretty obvious that as a community member, we wanted to encourage contributions from developers, and what better way than Hacktoberfest, right? So we had the open source repos, the GraphQL engine, the Learn GraphQL, and I think the Gatsby Gitbook starter, and all of those repos participating in this Hacktoberfest. And we've had pretty good contributions as well. We've had good ones for TypeScript migration for the Hasura console. We've had like a couple of server contributions, and the Learn course updates on the language, and also on the course code snippets. So all of those updates were pretty good from the community, and we're pretty thankful for all of those who contributed in Hacktoberfest and keep doing awesome things for this year as well. Uh, right. So there's another question from Kalama. What are the plans for 2021? Though I really love Hasura. Yeah, so I'll come back to what we have in store for 2021 in a while. Um, so 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 far we've seen what Hasura has done in 2020 in terms of product being updated and how the product evolved over the last 12 months. We've also had a few updates in the GraphQL ecosystem where tools like GraphQL and GraphQL Playground is being updated. GraphQL Playground being taken over by the foundation into the GraphQL repo, and we saw like a rise of uh, Fluent GraphQL clients. So in the mix of Apollo client and Oracle and so on, we've had newer clients which try to solve a different problem, which try to solve the ability to query GraphQL as objects instead of strings. So we've had like a bunch of clients coming in to solve this particular issue, and for example, one of my favorite Fluent client is GQLS. So that's something that is pretty easy to use on your front end for most small applications. So I haven't really looked at the caching story around it, but it's a pretty good start for a new range of clients on the front end. So the other update the ecosystem had, I've been following the foundation working group as well, and there's a GraphQLScalars.com for a list of custom scalars that are being maintained by the community, and that's an uh, interesting use case because um, some data types like, for example, date time and so on, which are not natively supported by GraphQL, you need a way um, to reuse those types in your custom code. So this is a pretty good way to maintain a list of scalars, and hopefully more scalars come in, and support for that would be pretty nice. Also, we saw updates to the defer and stream directives. We've seen RFCs to the GraphQL repo, the spec repo. We've seen updates to those two directives, and it's pretty exciting to see these being updated. And I feel that in 2021, the adoption of different stream will pick up by different services, and that's when I think you will see more asynchronous applications leveraging this use case, and that's going to be exciting. Right. So going back to the Kalema's question on what's in store for 2021. So we have to begin with in January, we have this campaign called GraphQL January, which has like a bunch of webinars, live streams, and tutorials for learning about Hasura and GraphQL. So we have like an introduction series for GraphQL beginners, and we have some advanced topics for learning about Hasura and GraphQL in production. We have content coming out daily as blog posts. We have weekly Q&As, and we have a Hasura Advanced Learn course, which is coming out pretty soon, which talks about using the advanced security and reliability features with Hasura. So do check that out. This is the link for the campaign. You can sign up for any updates as we keep coming up with. I'll just post this link on chat in some time. So this is hasura.io/GraphQL/ January-campaign. And we have Graphical Asia coming up. This time it's an online event. Um, this is happening on the last week of February, this 24th and 25th. And it's online, and this time it's free. Everybody can join in, and it's still open for proposals. So do submit your proposals, and do register as a participant as well. There are like exciting talks going to be there, pretty sure. So yeah, do join in for the event. On the product side, we have support for multiple databases, starting off with MySQL and SQL Server, which we announced preview support for last year. We'll become stable with MySQL and SQL Server in a couple of months. And we're also adding support for BigQuery, and support for more databases will come soon later this year. So the idea is that you can have one version of Hasura running to which will connect to multiple data sources like MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server, and so on. Or it could be multiple Postgres as well. So that's multiple database support for 2021. And on the product side, on the OSS repo, you could have seen the issues, the long pending ones, the long requested ones, support for multiple roles. So that's coming in pretty soon. We have a PR in works, which is in preview. So multiple roles is something that will land in stable pretty soon. We have a remote schema permissions, which currently we have remote schema that can be added, but the permission system is missing for remote schema. So that's getting added this year. In fact, the PR is already merged, the preview PR. So that will land in 1.4. And next up is generalized remote joins, which is joining across multiple remote schemas. So currently with remote joins, you can join data between your Postgres table and your remote schema. With generalized remote joins, the ability to join data between two different remote schemas, two independent remote schemas, will be possible. So that will open up a whole new use case where Postgres is not your only source. It could be any other data source. And more granular permissions for actions. That's something that will come up later this year, where you can filter out responses before it reaches the client based on what role is querying for. So that's actions permissions. And finally, some updates to the Relay client support. We've released Relay support last year, but there are like a minor issues open on the repo. So we'll have full stable support for Relay coming soon. So to wrap up this, I would end up with this question for you folks, to say what was your favorite feature that got released in 2020, and also what features are you expecting to see in 2021. So these two questions, do answer them on chat. Do ping us on Twitter. Tag us on Twitter with these quotes. So that's mostly it from me for the stream. From next week, you will see updates from the GraphQL January campaign. So you can see full stack apps being built every week, starting with React, and we'll also try to catch up on Next.js and Gatsby over the course of this month. Me and Adrian would be building full stack apps with Hasura and the front end framework of choice this month. So that's for next week, starting next week on the live streams on Wednesdays. So yeah, that's mostly it from my side. Yeah, thanks for joining in. See you, see you, folks.